All right, so welcome and thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to our very first quickinar. We have been talking about this West Virginia Management Network for quite some time, and we are so excited. This has been probably almost a year in the making that we've been talking about this and wanting to kick this off. So we are thrilled that the day is finally here to launch our very first quickinar. And so a little bit of background about the group. So this whole platform is for managers, leaders, supervisors of all industries, of all levels, but also those who are aspiring leaders. We wanted to make this available to anyone who has an interest or already is playing a role in leading your company. And this was important to us because we know that the landscape right now is changing. It's changing really, really fast. And so we believe that it's important that you all be able to stay on the leading edge of what's happening, and that you all are the success of your company, which is the success of our state. So your role and your impact is very, very big. So throughout this year long, and this will go on for well beyond 1 year, but we have the topics, we have everything kind of set for really the journey that we're looking to take you through for this first year. And these are topics and perspectives not from 5 years ago, not from 10 years ago. These are all very current and very relevant. So you're going to be getting, again, a lot of leading edge discussions, a lot of leading edge thoughts and perspectives. So we think that your year of expansion and growth is going to be really great over the next couple of months. So quick, again, overview about how this will all work. So each month we will do a 20-minute quickinar. Today's might go over just a little bit as we start to kind of set the tone for this whole strategy. But each month you'll have a very concise 20-minute quickinar to just give you a dose of inspiration of a new topic. And then each quarter we'll go into a longer workshop where we have a lot more Q&A. It will probably be about an hour in length. We also have a LinkedIn group that will continue to build over time, and that's where you can also ask questions. You all will get to know each other. We'll get to know you. We'll also be able to answer any questions that you have. If you feel like you're hung up on in a certain area or need a little bit of guidance, we'll be able to help you. And you'll also be able to get some feedback and guidance from those in the group. So the LinkedIn group will be a great place where we can share and interact. And we'll talk a little bit about the topics too, but our whole goal though for this next, 6 to 8 months together is really that, we believe management and leadership is an inside job. And so much of what we're talking about over the next year is much more about being than doing, which is a huge shift in what we have been led and learned to believe is the right way to do it. So a lot of what we'll be talking about over the next little bit of time is really then a mix of personal development and then a mix of skills. So here I have the calendar laid out for you of the topics that we'll be covering over the next year. So you can see that, again, we've got a little bit of a good bit of personal development, a lot of the inner work here, but we also have the skills, the skills that you can tap into as well. So this is our plan over the next couple of months together. And then next Wednesday, we'll be talking about how to create a highly engaged and low turnover workplace, which is a very popular topic right now. We've been talking about this for a little while. And after today's discussion, I think you'll see why that's really, really important and so relevant right now. So before we start into our topic, I just want to quickly preposition who is behind all of this. So I'd love to, so this whole program is brought to you by Align HR. Many of you might know Bernie Deem. Bernie Deem is the owner of Align HR. She, along with Zach Abraham as well. And Align HR covers the state of West Virginia and beyond. They do HR consulting. So anything from staffing, benefits, compensation, compliance, training, performance management, performance reviews, any of your organizational development, that is their strength. And that is what they do. So they have all aspects of human resources covered, and they are such a great resource for all companies across the state. And then also Business Uplifted. And so Business Uplifted, we are a training and consulting group, and we create programs around leadership. And we also tend to look at organizations just through a different lens. And we're a bit of what you might call systems busters. And that will start to make sense as we go through this presentation, but that's a lot of the role that we play. And this is me. And so I thought I'd just give you a quick introduction about who will be leading these sessions over the next couple of months. But I'm Mandy Curry, and I am the founder of Business Uplifted. And Bernie and I actually spent many years working together. She actually was the first one to give me my job way back when I started in banking many years ago. So I spent 20 years in corporate, most of that time in management. And then I stepped out of it. I stepped out of it a couple of years ago. I was starting to feel a passion, still obviously around the business world, but I was starting to move into a food and health industry. And so I built some businesses in that space. And then felt then compelled to come back and serve the corporate employees too. But it seems like everything that I do always gravitates a little bit toward training. But in the end, and the much, much bigger picture of all of it is I have this huge desire to really help those live life on the other side of fear, lack, and limitation, because that is truly what holds us down and what keeps us small. So if you've ever felt like, wow, I wish I made more money, or we're in jobs that we don't like, or we're unhealthy, or we're in relationships that we don't like. I mean, that's what, that a life on the other side of that is really where I get super excited. So it's that limitless life. And you'll start to find that plays into a lot of these sessions as we get to know each other over the next couple of months. So, all right, that is enough of the introductions. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about Gen Z and now 5 generations in the workplace. So the way that this works, you actually can be born within about 3 years of the beginning or end of a generational cycle and still have its characteristics. So I just want to go through what each of these are, because you might want to find that you just jot down, oh, okay, this birth range probably describes me the best. So traditionalists, you can see roughly born 1945 and earlier. Baby boomers, 1946 to 64, again, give or take a few years. Then we have Gen X, born 65 to 76-ish. Then we start to see Gen Y, which is the millennials that we have heard so much about for many years. Born anywhere between 1977 to 2000-ish, give or take a few years. And now we have Gen Z that we're talking about today, which was born in 1996 to that 2000 range up to now. So that's what we'll be talking about. And just make a little note of that, because it's really interesting to see, again, awareness is a really, really big part of this. So there are actually 3 trends that shape each generation, and it's more behavioral based than even age based. So in this case, parenting, technology, and economics are really the 3 biggest drivers of these generational trends. So if you look at baby boomers, for example, and baby boomers may have said, oh man, we things were difficult for us. So for our kids, we want to make it easier for them. So parenting plays a really, really big part in that and how the next generation is raised. So I want to show you just how large each of these groups are, and then we'll talk about how large they are in our organizations too. But as you can see, though, right now the number of millennials far exceeds any other category. I shouldn't say far exceeds, but it is the biggest group right now that we have. Baby boomers being the second. Then we have traditionalists. And then we, obviously Gen Xers are the smallest, and we'll talk about those in a minute as well. But what's interesting in the workforce, though, so in the workforce, millennials now make up the highest percentage. So they are 35% of your workforce. Gen Xers are now 33%. The boomers are 25%. And now the newest Gen Z into the workforce are 5%. But Gen Z is expected to be 20% of the workforce in just the next couple of years. So it is very, very big. We have a lot of changes that are coming on the horizon, and the face of the workplace is definitely starting to change. So I'd like to talk a little bit about each group and what makes them unique. And we'll start first with the traditionalists. So those who might be perhaps, in their mid 70s right now. They grew up in the Great Depression and World War II. And for them, work is a privilege. And they earn their way through hard work. They also are the wealthiest generation too. So you may still see traditionalists in your locations. And so that is what makes them so unique and so special. Now I want to talk about the baby boomers, because this again is one of the again, a larger group that we see in our organizations. So baby boomers, anywhere ranging between that 53 to 71 years old, again, give or take just a little bit. But a big event in their life was the JFK assassination. If you are a baby boomer, you will remember exactly where you were when that happened, exactly how you felt. It defined your generation. It defined the way that you grew up. Um, Likely grew up in a very strict environment of what is right and what is wrong. Also became the first TV generation. And for baby boomers, work has really been a sense of worth and self-fulfillment. It is very hard to outwork a baby boomer, and that is their sense of pride. They take so much pride in their work ethic, how hard they work, how long they work. You also see maybe baby boomers, women were fighting for a place at the top and for a seat at that conference table. So, and they wanted to make sure that their children were happy because they perhaps maybe felt the stresses of work and didn't want their children to feel that. The boomer name actually came because there was an uptick in births after World War II. So that's why we see so many baby boomers in today. But such a wonderful group, and they bring so much, obviously, to our organizations. They are our organizations. Let's keep talking, though. Let's talk about the next one. So the next is Generation X. And you might be wondering, well, how did they get the name? How did we go from traditionalists to baby boomers to Generation X? Well, it's pretty interesting, but the X, if you think about it like a mathematical equation, you're solving for that X. It's that missing number. And that's often how this generation felt, feeling a bit lost. So if you find that you were a Gen Xer, and I'm raising my hand to this, as a Gen Xer, perhaps you felt that, when Gen Xers showed up, no one really listened. They were in the shadows of the baby boomers and spent much of their career trying to get the attention of the baby boomers and really just trying to vie for as much as they could. They just felt lost and a bit overlooked. And this look, I love this look of her. And here's another one, which always cracks me up. And this too, again, some Gen Xers. This is actually the Business Uplifted team. But you look at that face and it's like, oh man, there's a little bit of just jadedness, sometimes even a little bit bitter. But the great thing about Gen Xers is they truly are systems busters. They don't like to be ordered around. You probably see that, or perhaps if you are one, you feel that. But they kind of like to blaze their own path a bit. And so here's what's interesting about Gen Xers. And again, born roughly in the 60s to late 70s. Most are now the parents of the new Gen Z that's coming into the workforce. But what Gen X brought us was this start of this independence from traditional structures. This is when we started to see homeschooling, because the traditional school structure became too limiting and too confining. Homeschooling starts to rise. We start to see telecommuting as a result of that. So it's very, very different. Work really didn't really see work quite the same way as the baby boomers. This is an interesting fact. 83% of Gen Xers consider their children to be their best friend. And they have very much a mantra of just tell us what to do and get out of our way. They grew up very independent. So in many cases, they were called the latchkey kids. So they got home from school, opened up the door, got everything they needed, got their dinners ready. They got their homework done. They were completely independent. And then you still find that in the workplace today, where they say, just tell me what to do and then get out of my way and let me do it. And that's really how they like to live that. So you can start to see how we all play a difference in the workplace. Now let's talk about the next generation. And these are the Millennials, also known as Gen Y. And so the Millennials right now are roughly about 22 to 37, almost 40. So we continue to talk about Millennials, and to the point that we sometimes have millennial fatigue. And we wonder, why are we still even talking about Millennials? But the reason that we still talk about Millennials is they changed our organizations forever. They changed it all. And they still are making such an impact. And we're still trying to figure out, how do we kind of restructure our organizations to really maximize what the millennials are bringing. So it's still a very important topic of discussion that we're still having. So again, millennials are almost 40 in many cases. They are now the largest generation in the workplace. Many of them, almost half of them, are now parents. And it's interesting. What they brought to us was such a more collaborative work ethic, work strategy. They sometimes, in some cases, like a little bit more handholding. And this is where we started to see the networks pop up. They like to get advice from their network of friends. So now we start to see things like the value in testimonials. You think about your online experience and how important now those testimonials are in the buying process. And how important now the influencer market is. So now if your friend likes a product, you're more likely to buy it because your friend has talked about their experience. So millennials really brought a lot of that influencer market to us, which has been huge and changed the way that we work. They have also changed the way that we designed workspaces. So you might see now that with millennials, it's very collaborative. Now it's just give me a big long desk and a laptop, and I'll work alongside a table with 6 other people. They no longer need their own office and would prefer not to have their own office because the beauty for them is in collaboration. So now you started to see places like co-working spaces pop up where it doesn't matter. We don't need to have an actual office. If there's just a co-working space where I can go and just lease a chair from a place for a few hours, then that's all that I need. I just need a chair, a desk to prop my laptop on, and that's fine. So the workplace is even moving out of the office. Now it's into coffee shops and co-working spaces and lobbies of hotels. It has all changed thanks to the millennials. So where Gen Xers, really could not wait to get that office and felt like that office was their, that was what they dreamt of their whole life. The millennials say, not really, don't really care about it. Really love this collaborative working space. So for millennials, the most important event to shape their life was 9/11. And what we also saw from millennials was the invention of Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, whole new ways of working and collaborating and talking. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, is only 33 years old. It has completely changed the landscape. And there is a little bit of this stigma that there is an entitlement to millennials, which is, and so many of the millennials themselves balk at that and say, no, that is not true. That is not true. So definitely not true to that entitlement. Some may feel that way, but definitely not true. But what millennials have brought to us is passion and impact and purpose. And they brought that to the organizations, and it was completely unexpected. And so we find now there's so many conversations now around purpose in the workplace and how important that is, and passion and the impact that we are having. Those are not conversations that we had prior to the millennials. It has completely changed now the way that we're talking. And so as next week, when we talk about engagement, we'll start to talk about how passion and impact and purpose are now changing the way that we work and how important it is to include that. So those are our first 4 generations. Now let's talk about the last generation, which is Gen Z, who are beginning now to enter into the workplace. And it's so interesting with Gen Z. So Gen Z could actually navigate a tablet before they could talk. They mastered technology before even talking. They have only known technology. As we talk about 9/11, 9/11 is a part of their history now. They never actually experienced it. It's just now a part of the history books for them. So it's very, very different in how that changes the perspective. They're now growing up. They have grown up in the shadows of millennials. So most people think that they are all one and the same and didn't even really kind of think that there was a group after millennials, but there is, and they're different. And they are a little bit more guarded with their information. They also only know diversity. So for Gen Z, they only know same-sex marriage, transgender, African American president. That is all that they know. They also might check their social media as many as 100 times a day. And some may spend more time on devices than even sleeping or school or even work. So that has become a real part of it. I remember when cell phones first came into the workplace, and it was very hard as managers to figure out how to manage that. We didn't know, we weren't used to having that going on, and for many managers, it felt like that was such a distraction for the day. And so you often might see managers trying to control that and saying, oh, we're going to collect the cell phones. You have to keep your cell phones out. You have to keep them in your purse or in your car or away. And now we're seeing that they are just such a part of our life. And it's now a part of embracing that, because that's it's such an important, we're checking as many as 100 times a day. And for Gen Z, there is a big fear of missing out, and there's a big fear of living offline and not having access to the online world. So those are two big changes for them. And probably the most interesting part of this is that it is predicted that we will look more like Gen Z than they will look like us. And so this is a really big takeaway from today's session, is that the younger generations are now the biggest predictors of the older generations and how we act and how we perform. So think about Facebook, for example. This is a fun example where you have Gen Zers perhaps on Facebook or on Twitter, or Instagram is another great example that Gen Z is embracing Instagram. Well, grandma really wants to be able to see what's happening with her grandkids. And she's not probably getting as many calls as she used to, but she knows that on Facebook are all the pictures of her grandkids. So grandma joins Facebook. She joins Facebook so that she can keep up with what her grandkids are doing and with what the family is doing. And it becomes that great way of connection. So that's a great example of, the younger generation influencing perhaps how the older generation then is behaving. And so now we're starting to see such trends of grandparents now on Facebook as a result of it, and a great way for them to keep up. So very interesting. What we also see with Gen Z is this new concept of a shared economy. So you look at, the biggest source of overnight stays, this company has no hotels. It's Airbnb. It's a shared economy. You look at who's the biggest transportation company. They have no cars. It's Uber. It's a shared economy. The same thing for Netflix. That is what we're seeing right now. There's a shared economy that Gen Z has brought to us. We also see instant gratification. We love that. You can think Amazon, the 2-day ship. We no longer want to wait 7 days for whatever we order to arrive on our doorsteps. We want it the same day. Now, food companies are delivering food to your doorstep on the same day of you ordering it. We love that instant gratification. And for Gen Z, they are communicating almost entirely through screens and not always with actual words. So you probably see that a lot of emojis are popping up, or GIFs. Gosh, GIFs are like the GIFs, however you want to say that. But that is a big way of communicating now, is just by video and using that to express, or your Bitmoji. But it's not antisocial at all. It's just a different way of communicating. And if it shows you just how big emojis are, the Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year for 2015 was not even a word. It was an emoji. So how different now we can see the workplace is, and the way that we are communicating is changing so much. So that is an overview of all of the different generations. And I'd like to talk a little bit now about how do we begin to prepare for Gen Z in your workplace, and what would actually be the, what we call the evolution of your organization, because it is evolving. Whether we want to admit it or not, your organization is evolving. And as we start to bring more and more generations, more and more of these different characteristics in the workplace, it has no choice but to evolve. So here's what we're looking for with Gen Z. So this is what they look for in job training. Right now it is looking at on demand is very big to be able to learn whenever you want to. DIY is very big, but the big part is snack size videos. Video is huge right now. And what we generally see, especially with Gen Z, is a very short attention span. And the attention span is about 8 seconds. And I would say that many other generations, we're not too far off from that, but about 8 seconds is the attention span. So we've got to capture their attention quickly. You probably noticed from social media. We in our company, we create a lot of videos. So a few years ago, we would create very long how-to videos. The videos might be, sometimes 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Now they have to be 60 seconds. 60-second snippets just to give them a little bit of an overview. That's really all that they want to consume. So if you can keep it to 45 to 60 seconds and do some small snippets, very concise information, that's really what they're looking for. They love DIY. Anything they can learn on YouTube, anything that they can search and look for on their own, that is what they love. And Gen Z would love for your onboarding of them to just be 1 day or less. That's it. I mean, no longer are they wanting to go spend a full week in a training classroom or longer sometimes and go through that entire process. They would love to be onboarded in just a day and then start to get their hands into it. So not necessarily the classroom for learning skills. They really like that hands-on. They also like to interact very visually. So we're now starting to see, and we've been seeing this for a couple of years, but it's becoming even more and more prevalent, is FaceTime, Skype, and Zoom, or whatever the platform is. But we're seeing a lot more about video. This is the way that they want to interact. And I saw this recently. I think it was probably last summer. I was leading a video webinar, and it looked just like this. There were like 4 tiles of different groups, and I was leading it for a teen group, a group of teens. These are the Gen Zers. And it was so interesting because I'm leading and talking about the subject that we're talking about. And in one of the boxes is one of the teens, and it becomes almost like a reality show inside her box. I mean, she has the video on her, and she's walking all through her house, and she's, getting her hair ready, and she's, getting her makeup ready. Then she goes into the car. And so you're still seeing her in the car, and you're seeing the background. She gets out of the car. She goes to the place she's going. All of this is happening while we're all having a discussion, and she's a part of the discussion too. But it's almost like it became almost like a reality show in and of itself while we're having the video session. And it was classic. That is just the way that Gen Z loves to interact right now. It is a completely different thing than what we have probably seen many cases in our corporate world in the past. They also love, though, as much as they love that video, what they love about the video is to be able to see them, because there's a trust factor that's very important to Gen Z. So they love either the video to be able to see them or to be face-to-face with them. Those are 2 big important things that they're looking for. And when it comes to a position, they want to do a lot of things. So remember, Gen Z has that fear of missing out. So they want to do a lot of things. And it also helps them to expand a little bit. But many are saying that they want to work at smaller companies where they can wear a lot of hats. So companies that might be under 100 people, that's where they want to go, because they want to do as much as they possibly can. And it really helps them to be able to just, they're used to multitasking. They're used to doing so many different things. So the many more hats and more experiences they can do, the better for them. So in many cases, if you're onboarding Gen Z, perhaps even having some sort of just job rotation would be good to help them to get started. And if nothing else, just to kind of see the broader scope. And what's also really interesting too about Gen Z is they love everything customized. So Gen Z, they love to customize their tennis shoes. That's really big. They love to customize their Bitmoji and what their Bitmoji profile looks like on their text messages. They love to customize their gaming characters that they're playing with online. They love all of that. It's as much customization as they can get. and also want to customize their own job description and their own title. So be open to that. That is the world that they know, and they are brilliant at creating this customized reality. So we are now so able to have tunnel vision right now. We are able to follow only the brands that we want to follow, and only the groups that we want to follow, only the subjects we want to follow. So we have such tunnel kind of vision right now, which is really cool. We get to customize and create what our reality looks like. And they want to also bring that into the workforce too. They care less about climbing the corporate ladder. That's not important to them. For baby boomers, for Gen Xers, this was the life. And this was our life. This is what was most important, was climbing the corporate ladder. And for Gen Z, it's really not. It's not as important. To them, it is more about their personal path. That is what's most important to them. It's not about climbing somebody else's ladder. It's really about just finding their own inner path and really just navigating their own personal path. And 61% of Gen Z want to work at a company for 10 years. So that's very different from millennials. There is definitely a longevity. They want to be a part of that. So it is definitely very, very different. And unlike millennials, they aren't into as much of a collaborative workspace. They enjoy working more alone. They enjoy a little bit more of that alone time. And it has been said, some claim that constant exposure to screen time has maybe changed some, kind of neural pathways in the brain sometimes. So, which might impact perhaps some social skills, perhaps. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but they do have this great ability to shift in and out of tasks really, really quickly, which is such a great skill, but definitely not as collaborative as what we've seen with the millennials. And what they're looking for in a boss is leaders to provide clear direction. So where we saw Gen Xers said, okay, tell me what to do and leave me alone. They're actually, and millennials are saying, well, let's kind of all learn together. They're actually saying, okay, really provide me with some very clear direction. And I'm looking for that in a mentor and in leadership. So again, a little bit of a different shift. And this is really one of the biggest changes that we're seeing. And we're going to talk a lot about this, especially next week as we talk about engagement. But 84% of millennials say that making a positive difference is more important than recognition. So we're starting to see now, the last two generations, how they are motivated in the workforce is completely different than perhaps what baby boomers and Gen Xers were accustomed to. And so we're going to be talking about this a lot. But what we see, though, is that for some, any kind of work, it didn't matter what the work was. They were just motivated by doing a good job. It didn't matter what the job was, whatever it was, they were just going to do the best job they could do with it. Now, though, we see this very different. Now, what the job is and what the work is really, really important for many. And they want to know that they're making a difference. So 60% of Gen Z want to have an impact on the world with their job. And I know what you're thinking. You might be thinking, well, how can I do that? How can I help them have an impact on the world with their job? Well, we'll talk about that next week in the engagement session, but this is huge, and this is what we're seeing. This is how we start to create that impact. This is how we start to create that shift to where we really create some different environments and more meaningful work. So it is a very, very pivotal time in the management role. And I love this quote, when a flower doesn't bloom, we need to fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And so we oftentimes through this process, we want to judge. We want to judge, whoever it might be, whatever generation. We want to judge them. But really what we need to be talking about is, how do we evolve our workplace? We need to look at how do we evolve our environment so that all of these generations can thrive. And so truly what we see right now is the workforce is changing the workplace. And truly one of the biggest things that is coming right now out of Gen Z and that is taking us by storm, quite frankly, is that there is such a love amongst this group. They are so sensitive to feelings and the emotions of others. And that's really, really important, because emotions in the workplace is really, really big, right? It's a big topic. There's not a lot being said about it, but there's a lot that's happening around emotions in the workforce. And company management is still trying to get their mind around it. They're still trying to understand it, because for many generations, we have been taught to almost live this double life, that you would be loving and caring at home, but when you got to work and once you pulled into that parking lot, that you put the mask on, and that you became the manager, and you became a little bit, you shut the emotions off, and you became stern. You put your manager face on, and you played the part. And that's how generation after generation has worked in the workplace. And we didn't show emotions. And now we have a new generation, if not maybe two generations now coming in, saying, no way, that's not how we're working. They're saying, I want to be my authentic self at all times. The way that I am at home with my emotions and my feelings is the exact same way that I'm going to be at work. And so now we're starting to see, how do we integrate these emotions into our workplace? And you're starting to see that. You're starting to see that play out in things like the Me Too movement. And it's interesting because Bernie, who is obviously the co-founder in this project, she's speaking to 400 people next week about the Me Too movement. There are so many questions. So many want to understand, and they want to learn and then figure out how that applies to their team. So emotions are big, and we're going to be talking a lot about that over the next couple months. We've actually built that into one of our sessions to really start to talk about emotions. So as we start to wrap this up, so what can you do as a leader amongst your group? The first thing is that you can train your team about the generational differences. There is so much power in just awareness. There is so much power in just understanding. But it's really important, though, that as you train them, that we realize that there's no judgment. No judgment. There's not one generation that's better than the other. We all play a part. It's really important that we use discernment over judgment. So view it, understand, and appreciate our differences, but not judge them and not think one is better than the other, because they all serve and they've all made these companies so great. You also can expand your communication strategies. So you can find ways to make it more real with your team. And video is a great way to do it. So maybe you start to just have a couple more discussions via video than what you've had in the past. And just start to play around with that a little bit and see how that works in your company. You can also establish mentoring programs and even job rotation programs. Those are easy things that are fairly easy that you can put into place. You can, and the biggest thing is just to allow your team and your workplace to evolve, to focus on their talents, and to focus our efforts on their talents. And again, the biggest thing is just knowing that we have as much to learn from all of the other generations as they do us. So this is a wonderful opportunity to get to spread that word. And so when it comes to training your team about generational differences, you will have this presentation. You are welcome to take bits and pieces of this presentation and just share it with your team. And again, start to open up that dialogue and open up that discussion about what it looks like. And then you'll probably start to see how those generational differences have really impacted your work. And in some cases, you might see where it, perhaps maybe your office hasn't evolved as quickly as those who are working in it have. And so you might, from this discussion, find that there are some things that you can start to have some open dialogue about how do we start to make shape our environment to really kind of meet the different generations. So it just starts to have a really, really great conversation. But I hope that you feel empowered after this. I mean, that is our whole idea, is to empower you to take this quick information and then share it. And you can do this with your team too. Do a quick 20-minute quickinar with them. We can help you, of course, if needed. But I think, it's so great to come from you when you can just train them on all of this. That is the beauty of all of it. So in a very, very quick amount of time, we went over just a little bit, so I appreciate you all being so patient, but thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please post them to the LinkedIn group or be sure to email us. But we hope you'll join us next week, next Wednesday at 9:30 as we do our big quarterly session, which will be a little bit more in-depth, probably about an hour long, and we'll also do some Q&A. And then, of course, if you have friends or colleagues that you think may value from this network, we would encourage you to, have them to join as well, because we want to grow this group and be able to help as many people as we can across the state. That is our goal, and to give them some good kind of leading edge information that's going to really help and propel them forward, because it is changing really fast. Even things we talked about last year are not as relevant to what's happening right now. So this leading edge training is really important, that we help everyone to stay really on top of what's happening. So we hope that you have enjoyed this and you have gotten something out of this as we talk about Gen Z and 5 generations in the workplace. Thank you again for joining. We'll have the replay out for you, so you'll have this for your viewing pleasure down the road. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon. Bye.